So here we are in 2024, and Ali and I are here, and we're going to have a conversation about productivity as we're coming into January, and we're looking forward of the year ahead, and talking about goals coming up, and that's all often connected to productivity. And Ali has been deeply in thought about productivity and just what that means. And we're going to use the 8 steps of self-inquiry during this podcast. And that's just gone onto the website as a free product. Knowing that there's a lot more steps than just like the what's out there. And we're going to use this as an opportunity to demonstrate what it looks like to use that tool.
Yeah, and this is an interesting topic for this month, like you said, Coreen, because people are doing New Year's resolutions and there's a lot of goal setting happening right now. We've got a values-based goal setting course happening Sunday, January 21st, for those who want to take part in that. Also, the circle this month, the value that we're focusing on is productivity.
Mm.
Every month we have a circle, and every month we pick a different value to hone in on and get to know ourselves around that value, get into better relationship with that value. So it's top of mind right now, and it's making me think about my relationship with productivity. And there's actually some stuff coming up for me around transitioning from holiday stuff back into the doing time, and noticing that I'm getting jammed up around a couple of things around productivity. So Coreen, you're going to sort of lead me through the 8 steps to self-inquiry. And I don't know where we're going to get to, and I'm interested to understand a little more what's going on with my relationship with productivity, and how can I have learn more so that I can hopefully have a better relationship with productivity, let's say this time next year.
Yeah, totally. And like this is all an ongoing science experiment with our lives and as we build relationship with ourselves. So the first step is to describe a situation. So is there something specific around the like an issue or a situation around productivity that you want to sort of neutrally frame for us?
Yeah, so the situation is this back and forth between feeling really productive and feeling like I'm getting a lot done, and then not being able to transition out of that and to actually relax. So I'll get a ton of stuff done in a day. Say I'll get my list for the day done, but there's always more, right? And instead of just being like, okay, you did it, you got the list done, I will, it's almost like the momentum of doing has a hard time slowing down and switching gears into not doing. And so then I either keep doing and overdo it, or I numb out to avoid the uncomfortable feelings that come with trying to like slow my roll, but not really being able to. And so then I'm quote unquote relaxing by numbing out, but I'm not really enjoying myself.
Mhm.
So
And what you would prefer is to have something a little bit more thoughtful and an easier transition and a more complete transition between the two. This is my productivity time, and I am productive, happily productive. And then here is my rest time, and I am happily, completely restful in that time.
that's right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Ooh, I like that. God, that's relatable. I want
Mm.
that too.
Yeah. The
All
productivity
right.
trap is like a phrase for a reason, right? The more we do, the more we feel like we need to do, and there's always more to do, so it's never done. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's a real
So,
thing.
okay, let's get started then into what are the values that are getting satisfied by, let's assume it's productivity. We'll say we use that as our kicking off point.
Yes. Yeah, thanks. This is number 2 on the 8 steps. And by the way, for folks who are listening, you don't have to do this in order. We'll do it in order, and then maybe at some point I will tell Coreen I don't like that question yet. And then we'll skip to another question. It's really more of an art than a science.
Mhm.
So, Coreen, you said what values are getting
Which
satisfied and frustrated?
which values are being satisfied? We'll start with satisfied from productivity.
Okay. Yeah, that's actually the harder one because I'm pointing out something that I don't like that's happening. And yet, there are values being satisfied by this happening because that's why I'm doing it, right? There must be something satisfied for me to do it. And there's something about accomplishment for sure. Accomplishment is one of my values. Um, and something about competence. Competence is one of my main values, and it also gets shadowy for me. And under the heading of competence are things like accomplishment, um, and others, a number of others. So there is a jolt of whatever happy hormone when I complete a task. And so um not only does that show up in um completing a task and being like, yes, my accomplishment and competence values have been met, but also if I try to complete tasks and they don't get resolved, I'm able to maybe make progress on them, but I'm not actually able to accomplish them. I have this like big reaction of frustration because not only did I not get the task done, but this big value of competence that I have around accomplishment also got frustrated. So it's almost like a double whammy since my competence value seems to be so, so important to me, whether I like it or not.
And the one that comes up, and I want to ask you about is I know belonging is an important one too. And this one can be like, and I'm just going to test this around to see if it lands with you or not.
Mm.
Around like social acceptance or like being a good person in society and like those kind of like if I'm productive, then I am socially acceptable. And is that connected to the value around belonging at all? And if not, that's cool too. I just want to test that out.
Right, like this sense of, am I getting it right? Am I doing it right by getting the
Yes.
socially acceptable amount of things done in a day? And if
Yeah.
not, not too many days in a row, I had a day where I didn't do anything. And if I told somebody that, what would they say? They would probably say something like, oh, well, we all need those days every once in a while. But if that was a month,
Mhm.
wouldn't be acceptable, that sort of thing. Yeah, I think that's
Mhm.
true.
Yeah, it's something just to notice.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then
Belonging
what
and
about the,
competence are my both are my two that
yeah,
just seem to just always be there in one way or another.
yeah. And I know love is, are you okay with me testing some of your values that I'm aware
Yeah,
of? Because I know
Like,
love is
are
a,
you sure this isn't important to you?
right, which
Yeah.
is part of the joy of
Mm,
having somebody that's like in sharing that we're sharing values with back and forth in an open and transparent way.
right.
Love, where does love show up on the satisfied or frustrated end of
Mhm.
productivity?
Yeah. Love is a funny one for me. I feel like when you share your top values, Kareen, love is always really front and center for you. And
Mhm.
you like use that a lot as a way to like analyze where you're at. For me, love is like the main focal point of where all the other values funnel from. And yet it tends to show up as a little too abstract for me to
Uh-huh.
be able to connect it to like the tangible things. It's almost like since love is connected to everything, it doesn't even need to be talked about. Because of course it's
Mhm.
involved. It's
Yep.
it's the driving force. But that being said, I mean, this question that you often come back to around what's the most loving thing I could do? I think love probably is frustrated in this situation. An act of self-love would look like letting myself enjoy rest, and that's not
Mm.
happening right now. And it's not a loving act to other people, I don't think, to do it the way that I'm doing it because nobody cares or knows the way that I'm doing it now. And these aren't like this isn't like getting a bunch of stuff done that people are waiting for me on. This is just stuff that is about me. It's not like there are contingencies. So yeah, I would say love is probably on the frustrated side.
Yeah. That's fair. And that's important to like explore and put some words around. And I also can see like the way you talk about love is also expanding and evolving as well. Okay. So you've got those are your satisfied values, belonging, accomplishment, and competence. And what was there another one that you wanted to add to that one?
The
Around your
satisfied
satisfied
value,
values. Yeah.
accomplishment, competence, belonging. No, that's great.
Okay. And then how about frustrated values around productivity?
Yeah. The one that came up was peace. Peace is a top value for
Mm.
me. And yeah, it's not peaceful to try to rest, but need to check out in that resting time. So peace. And
Mhm.
then the love piece I mentioned before fits in that
Mhm.
frustrated category.
Perfect. And then number three, we're moving through. Identify the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors you have around this issue. What are you thinking? What are you feeling? And what are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot to this one, hey?
Well, do you want to start with behaviors? Do you want to do like some self-observation around the things that you're doing around productivity or the feelings that you're feeling or the thoughts that you're thinking? Where do you want to start?
Yeah. Okay. So around this number three, around productivity, the behavior is um, do the action. And then once the action is done, the feeling is actually like related to insecurity. The feeling is like um, aimlessness and like this lost sort of like, what do I do now? Kind of using the list of things to do as an excuse me, as an anchor point. And if I know what the next thing on the list is and I feel like I have the energy to do it, I have clarity. So maybe there's something here about clarity too,
Mhm.
clarity and certainty. Um, oh, I typed this, but I didn't write it on my piece of paper. Self-trust is also a big value going on here. And I would say self-trust is frustrated in this
Ah,
situation.
okay.
Um, yeah, so feeling a lot of uncertainty in that little moment between tasks or between doing a task and then deciding to do nothing.
Oh, can I ask you, are we actually dialed into exploring productivity or the transition between rest and productivity? Is it more like that?
Um, it's
Because
well,
we can do both a little bit, like where it maybe makes more sense, like dial into productivity, but it's the issue is actually in the how you move between the two and the peace or uncertain or lack of peace that you have in that transition. Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely the transition. And but it's also like, so if I do the thing and then the transition is clunky, and if the transition doesn't quote work,
Mm.
then it's the resting part that it gets funky too.
Mhm.
Like depending on how well the transition goes, I can either succeed or not in
Mhm.
the next phase. So there's definitely something going on there about the transition.
Can I ask you then, can we, around these thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, can we focus in on the thoughts that you have around resting when you have a clunky transition?
Okay. Um,
And I'll tell you why I'm asking that because I'm looking for the source of the judgment, the
right.
self-judgment.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want to uncover those like bitey, self-judgy spaces.
Yeah. Um, the thoughts around resting, it's actually not like I shouldn't be resting. It's more like, what do I even want to do? What do I even care to do? Uh, excuse me. It's like it's a funny, it's like the come down after a high, like the productivity high, like I got something done and that feels so euphoric. And now what do I even care about? Like what's left? It's like this like the miniest version of I ran a marathon and now life doesn't matter because I did the
Right.
thing and now what am I
Life
even
is pointless.
right? It's like a little mini version of like, well, I I'm not even excited by the idea of like doing something fun. I don't want like I'm like, what do I like that's fun that I could do right now?
And you
I
have trouble accessing what is fun because
right.
it's not there at the moment.
And I
And
think of
okay,
I think of the things I like to do and they don't seem appealing to me in that moment.
right. And so those same things would be appealing to you in a different moment where you had just not had that transition from a high productivity space.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And also relatable. I really enjoyed the way you unpack and uncover things in a way where I'm like, these are things that I experienced too, and I breeze right past them. And I really like the way you're like, let's dive in a little deeper here. So I'm always like appreciative of that with you.
Hmm.
Um, so do you need to? So let's do a little bit of like just grab that one thought. And is this thought true? So let's go into number 4. So we're not going to do like a shopping list, 100 things that you're thinking, feeling, and doing. Let's just grab one. Um, is this thought true? Like, I don't care about anything, or whatever that sort of judgmental or hopeless statement is. What is the point of it all? Is that thought true that I don't even know what fun is?
Right.
And find your access point in those kinds of questions.
I think it's true that in that moment, I don't have an interest in doing any of the things.
Yeah. And is it true that you never are able to access things that you find enjoyable ever?
Definitely not. Definitely
Right.
not true.
So in that moment, it's you can't because of this connection, but often you can. But in that moment, it is true. You are finding it difficult to access. And what do you think that feeling is telling you? Like, what is the wisdom in what's the point of finding something interesting to do?
That like hopelessness, that hopeless feeling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pointlessness, meaningless.
Yeah.
What is the wisdom in there?
There's also like something, maybe another feeling here too, um, that's bubbling up. Um, it's like there's like a fear actually when I have that thought, I don't care about anything right now. There's also fear, like a panicky, well, that's, um, I have no idea where to go from here. Like that sort of fear, like, um, if I don't want to do the things in life that I find enjoyable, then, maybe its meaning or something is completely gone. And that's really scary. That's like a scary moment. So then there's this, what happens is I'm running away from the fear and running away from maybe the hopelessness too. Like I'm sure running away from the hopelessness too. But that's where I think where the numbing action comes in is it's like do the thing, have the thought, have the feeling of like, oh, I don't really care about anything right now. Holy shit, that's scary. Let's just not think about that and do something that will be short term, um, pleasurable,
Mhm.
but not actually meaningful or nourishing in any way.
But at least it stops you from focusing in on the fear.
That's right. Like
Yeah.
scrolling or something like that. Yeah.
So let's capture that meaningfulness is a really high value for you.
Yeah.
And even though it's not connected to productivity, satisfied, or frustrated in your initial assessment, that it's coming up as something that actually needs to be held and looked at.
Right.
So if you had to guess, does it fall in the satisfied or frustrated category? And again, like we were evaluating those first ones from a when you're productive, how are these being satisfied or frustrated? So let's start with that same lens, meaningfulness or meaning. Satisfied or frustrated in productivity?
Yeah. Depending on the thing I'm being productive around, it can feel really meaningful.
Yeah.
Be very satisfied.
Hmm. Is
And
there
then
any way that it gets frustrated
in the
when you're
transition,
productive?
right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Is like the transition to the transition from like the structure of these are the things that quote unquote need to get done into now you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Okay. Normally I love that. I love having the freedom to not have time constraints and all of those things, but there's something about the pressure of being the only one who decides that in that moment or going from such certainty to such uncertainty. That meaning, yeah, it makes me think about the definition of meaning in a slightly different way, actually, when I look at it in that way. But literally, if I think about the definition of meaning as like knowing what things mean
Mhm.
in that moment, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's so in that moment, the transition moment, it is frustrated and again is scary.
That's cool. Huh. And so there's something like from the in the transition going from certainty to uncertainty and meaningful to a space yet to be meaningful, like yet to be. And it's just a field of pure potential, which is also a lot of work to be like, so what now? And that connection to that fear of meaninglessness and hopelessness is a strange space to occupy. So can I ask you a bit of a different question? Tell me about a time when you wake up in the morning and you're like, the productivity is not on your mind. And you do a really good job of being like super like restful. What is that experience like? And not to put it in comparison to, just to have it be on its own.
Yeah. I started doing this thing a couple years ago where on Fridays I'd have Ally date day.
Mm,
And it doesn't happen every Friday, but I aim for every Friday and then I get some of them.
yeah,
Um, where I try not to have any errands, any need to do's
yeah.
scheduled. And I don't work on Fridays in my day job. And so on those days when it hits, I'm feeling really optimistic and like relaxed and hopeful. We talked about hopelessness last time. It's literally the opposite. Hopeful about what the day might bring. And I feel like engaging with the world. I will often like go out and like, you know, get a tea at a coffee shop or something and just like let myself wander around and be like, oh, there's a garage sale going on. I'm gonna go in there because I feel like it, or let's just see what delights the world has for me today. Like that sort of mindset, which is so enjoyable to be in that mindset. And so that's a clear, like I have a clear sense of what it's like to do that in the way I want to do it. And that's what it is.
And I really am glad that you have that as an anchor. Where does meaningfulness land there in that world?
It usually shows up around connection to myself and others.
Mm,
Yeah. If I see other people, I'm really able to just like enjoy that connecting time. There's no getting stuff done blockers in the way. Um, and And then when I'm out and about, I'm not numbing out. I'm not trying to distract myself from uncomfortable feelings. So I'm just with myself and there's like a self connection. And that to me, that's a very meaningful thing to experience.
Hmm. So this is great. So we now have these two experiences put side by side. Um, and so we know that you can borrow from it's not like you don't have these experiences of like a positive experience of being restful or like just not product dialed into productivity. And so what is I don't want to get too, I want to be kind of careful here so that we're still going through the steps.
Mhm.
Because my coaching would sort of go in a different direction, just because I want to stay present with your experience. And I think we're doing something a little bit different on purpose. So
Can you share
stick to
each
the
of them?
program, Coreen.
I'd love if you
What's that?
shared each of them. Could you share, like, if we were coaching, I would go here, but instead I'm going to go here?
Yeah. Okay. Oh my gosh.
If you
I
can.
don't know. Can you hear my brain like the smoke coming
The
out of my ears here?
gears.
I love it. Okay, so if I was just coaching you clearly, I would say, oh, I don't even want to do it because I don't want to like skip to the end, but what is the way that you can use that um coming in for the full day, going into like alley date day, and what can you borrow back into that transition between productivity and rest? So you have this knowledge, you have these experiences, you have the innateness of doing that in a really good way. And so where can you um create like an anchor that you can weave into the way you transition from productivity to rest?
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. And if we were coaching, I would point out all the reasons why I could never do that. And then you'll help me see how it's possible. So,
Right.
cool. Instead,
Ah, okay. Back to the regularly scheduled program. This just in. All right. Um, how do you feel? So let's go back to the crunchy transition. How do you feel about the crunchy behavior? Like what are the thoughts you have about that crunchy transition? Like not how you're feeling in the transition, but what are your thoughts about the transition?
like observing the transition.
Hmm.
Um, I think that it's very common for us to have that. I think it has something to do with momentum for me. Like if I'm doing a certain thing, I want to keep doing it, whether it doesn't matter what it is. If I'm in a productive mode and I'll want to keep that momentum going. If I'm in a restful place, the more I'm resting, the more I want to rest. If I'm probably the only one is that it isn't is like social stuff. I have hit a wall when it comes to social stuff, but there's something about momentum that makes a transition tricky, and so just like the nature of how things work, things that move forward want to keep moving forward. And so it feels like there might be little ways for me to like trick myself into changing direction. If I'm biking one direction and I want to suddenly go over here, there are things you need to do to let that happen. If you do it too abruptly, you fall over. And I feel like that's what I'm doing is I'm falling over, or I'm like, you know what? It's too hard to turn left. I'm just going to keep going and keep
Hmm.
going and keep going because it's a scary thing to do that turn.
Hmm.
So,
So
yeah,
So what would you like to see happen going forward? What would be your preference?
I would like to, in those moments when I'm feeling anxious and uncomfortable, lost, you know, hopeless, I'd like to know what to do
Hmm.
to
You want to
transition
have a
out of
plan.
that. Yeah, that works, And I'd like to be able to transition out as soon as possible instead of, quote, wasting my rest time being anxious and just being like literally if I've been trying to figure out what the best way is for me to schedule my day around meetings and stuff like that. If I have a meeting at like 1 p.m. and then I have another meeting at 6 p.m., I'll spend the time between 1 and 6 p.m. anxious about the upcoming meeting. And it doesn't really matter how long of a span it is between those things to a point. If the meeting instead of being 6 p.m. is 6 a.m., I'm still anxious about it until it happens. Instead of being like, Allie, and I've tried to do this, Allie, you have so many hours. Like, I've tried to schedule in like worry time. If you start worrying about this a half an hour before the meeting, you will have had enough worry time. So just wait. Don't worry until a half an hour before. An alarm will go off to remind you to start worrying about this meeting and stuff like that. And it seems to sometimes work, but it's a very regimented way it's a lot
Yeah,
of
yeah.
getting reminders.
And I'm laughing because it's so relatable.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, so you would want to be able to transition faster from the productivity to the resting. And it's not just about the transition, but it's about the like shorten up the time frame of the fear is actually what we're dialed into.
Right.
You want to shorten that mm, fear space, time spent in like anxiety thoughts and you're not describing prepping for the meeting, you're describing worrying about the meeting, for example.
Yeah.
And this is a little bit of a different shift because we're not talking about rest. Okay, so it's like the productivity of the meeting, the resting time, and then the productivity of the next meeting.
Right.
Yeah, okay. I'm just trying to like bridge our examples here. And so how do you like that down delta to the rest on our little linear graphic here that I'm drawing with my hands, which is not helpful on a podcast, um, is how do you do that faster and move through those fear thoughts? And so, what values would be satisfied if you were able to have a really fast transition? So the meeting ends and you transition into peace and restful time. It can still be maybe productive, but it's not a high productivity, like you're still like productively resting,
Right.
if you want to think of it that way. And if I'm giving you words that are triggering, don't use them.
I think all of them would be satisfied.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this thing about accomplishment, being satisfied by doing it the way I'm doing it. If I could actually do it the way I wanted to, I would arguably be more productive.
Yeah.
I would probably have um, more certainty. I mean, if I could actually do that, the self-trust would be through the roof. It would be loving, it would be peaceful, it would be great.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then what would be frustrated if you could do that quickly? No fear thoughts don't exist. Meeting over, peaceful mindset.
I can't think of any that would be frustrated.
Mhm. Okay. And what we're looking for are values that could accidentally be frustrated by this highest hope, this
Yeah.
biggest dream, because sometimes that can actually happen. Um, and in this case, this seems like sunshine and roses, highly satisfied human. So now, can you build a values statement reflecting what you've learned? Because I
Mm.
value, and I'll give you one maybe for example, and then so I'll talk while you're thinking. How's that?
Yep.
And I'm making one up, so I may not hit the mark here. Because I value peace and I'm going for that highest hope satisfied. Um, I I want to be able to transition from high productivity to restful, peaceful thoughts quickly. and then be able to move back into productivity. So those transitions from one to the other, to the other, to the other. You want that transition to be so peace. Because I value peace, I want to have a more restful transition into rest, or a more peaceful transition to rest. I'm making up words here.
What
What
I
did
like
you come
about
up with?
that is it's not, I could have said, because I value peace, I want a better relationship with productivity. But that's a bit vague. And I like that you honed in on the transition bit. And because I value peace, I want a quicker, smoother transition from productivity to rest and back again. Love it.
Mhm. And how does it feel when you say that out loud? Because you said it like I can hear a resonance of like relaxation and peace in your voice. So that's what I'm taking from it. What did it feel like for you?
It feels really right and really true. The thought that pops up is, yeah, but how do I do that?
Hmm.
But yes,
Yeah.
it's like if I that's what I want, and I see that that would bring me peace.
Yeah. And now there's like you've got a clearer idea of what your outcome looks like rather than just not being hopeless, right? As opposed to that, now you have a plan of, um, in this endeavor of a peaceful energy experience, I will be seeking an easier transition. And that sets the stage for what your actual brainstorming of how to solve this is going to be. So it's not, how do I be less hopeless? Right? Which can have a different vibration and a different outcome than how do I attain peace in this process? So now you're looking for peaceful solutions as opposed to the opposite of hopelessness, but we're actually using the word hopeless. Fun.
And there is something
So,
about having this statement be front and center in my life and having it be the guiding structure, instead of the to-do list. The guiding structure was the to-do list and then dropping into the void. Instead, the guiding structure is, because I value peace, I want a smoother transition from productivity to rest. And so when I go back into my workday, this can be like on my wall or something, maybe to be like, oh yeah, this thing is actually the priority, not getting done as much stuff as I can so that I'm considered having done enough today. This is more important to me.
mhm. And do you think that having that as a priority is going to change? Are you suddenly going to become unproductive?
No.
Hmm, why not?
Um, because nothing in this says I will do less
Hmm.
or I will prioritize rest over productivity or anything like that. It's just it's honing in really specifically on and allowing both to be there, productivity and rest.
Right. Acknowledging this paradox of, or this sort of polarizing thought process of peace versus productivity. And it's peace and productivity.
Hmm.
Peace in productivity, peace during transition, and peace during rest, and peace during transition, and peace during productivity. Woof.
And to jump ahead, this piece, number 8, is about celebrate.
I want to celebrate. I've got like a bubble of joy popping up here.
Mm.
Celebrate, baby.
And the ways I'm going to celebrate are to write this down on a pretty card somewhere and put it somewhere in my life, and then talk to somebody that I talk to in my life about these sorts of things, like my sister or something, be like, set up a, I just learned a thing about myself around productivity and rest, and here's what I realized is important to me, and share it with her as like
Mhm.
like a sharing celebration. And then practice this. Um, Maybe doing some extra fun things in my rest time to start off in a like a fun way. Like set it up in a way that it's like hopefully more likely to go well, doing things that I might not always do. Yeah.
Yeah, that.
Thank you.
And
That was
yeah.
interesting to go through those steps and notice like where we both maybe wanted to like divert, but then we stuck to it and we did get to the end. And if we had diverted, we probably would have gotten to some really cool places, but we may have missed like getting to the allowing the like 1 to 8 to complete itself. That was neat.
Yeah, and I actually don't think I missed anything. Like, and what would you do? And so I did a little like, here's what I would do. And I think we got there anyway by following the steps.
Ah, trust the steps.